Welcome to Tulsa, mother of the Mother Road. Tulsa is home to one-of-a-kind experiences, a legendary music scene, and an unsurpassed love of the arts. A dynamic city, known for a variety of thriving urban districts, including a little-known district that is the epicenter of one of the nation's greatest triumphs and tragedies. Let's rewind.
Greenwood is the historic African-American community. It was dubbed Black Wall Street, but the Greenwood district was really much more like a Black Main Street. You would find beauty salons and barbershops, movie theaters, garages, dance halls, restaurants, grocery stores, haberdasheries, furriers, pharmacies. You'd find a bunch of professionals, doctors, lawyers, dentists, accountants, pharmacists, etc. So it was not a financial or investment capital. It was much more of a small business and entrepreneurial capital. The reason the Greenwood community existed in the first place as a business community was because segregation existed. There wasn't the opportunity to engage with the larger economy, so we created an insular economy over here in the Greenwood district. It was renowned for at least two things. One is the incredible economic success and entrepreneurialism that existed in the district, but also it's the site of the worst of the so-called race riots in American history, the Massacre in 1921. So it's important to understand the national context for what happened here in Tulsa. For example, in the summer and fall of 1919, it was called Red Summer. Red's a metaphorical reference for the blood that flowed in the streets from all this violence in New York and Baltimore and Memphis and Chicago and Elaine, Arkansas and Longview, Texas, on and on and on. So the context is one of an anti-Black sentiment in the nation. Now, there was a trigger incident that people are generally familiar with, an incident that happened on an elevator. Dick Rowland, 19-year-old Black boy who shined shoes downtown. Dick Rowland walked over from his shoe shine site, entered the Drexel building, boarded the elevator. The elevator was being operated manually by a young white girl named Sarah Page, who was 17 years old. Something happened on the elevator that caused the elevator to jerk, and Dick Rowland bumped into Sarah Page. Sarah Page began to scream. She told her story about being assaulted on the elevator, a story that she would later recant. She would actually refuse to cooperate with prosecutors after Dick Rowland was arrested for this alleged assault. The next day, which would have been May 31st, 1921, the Tribune published an article entitled "Nabbed Negro for Attacking Girl in an Elevator." It was a false narrative. A large white mob began to gather on the lawn of the courthouse. Dick Rowland again was being held in jail atop the courthouse. A small group of Black men, several dozen in number, marched down to the courthouse, intent on protecting Dick Rowland from what they thought might be a certain death. Some of the men in the Black group had weapons. Some of them were veterans of World War I, so they knew how to use those weapons. Words were exchanged. A white man tried to seize the gun that a Black man was holding. The gun discharged. And in the words of one of the massacre survivors, all hell broke loose from that point on. The violence lasted roughly 16 hours. It was devastating. The large white mob spilled over the Frisco tracks and into the Greenwood community, burning and looting and shooting their way through the community. We know that at least 1,250 homes in the Black community were destroyed. When all is said and done, we know that some 100 to 300 people lost their lives, most of them Black. Property damage, conservatively estimated at the time, was $1.5 to $2 million. That's well over $25 million. Many folks in the Black community were taken to these internment centers or these encampments, ostensibly for their own protection, but it really left the Greenwood community defenseless, and it was looted and burned in their absence. Absolutely, airplanes were used. There are credible eyewitnesses, written and oral testimonies that say these planes were dropping some sort of incendiary devices. Some say nitroglycerin, some say kerosene, that really caused the flames to spread more rapidly. The other thing that is virtually undisputed that was happening from at least one of the planes is that someone on at least one of those planes was strafing the community with bullets. Many Black families spent days, weeks, and months living in tent cities set up on the charred earth that was the result of the massacre. It's important for people to understand that the Greenwood district didn't cease to exist in 1921, although Some people probably would have liked for it to just sort of go away. It was in fact rebuilt bigger and better than it ever was. The story really is about the human spirit. It's about resilience, and it's about the ability of people to say to the larger community, we shall not be moved. This is our community. We're not going anywhere.
My name is Yvette Troupe.
I'm Guy Troupe, part owner and CEO of the Black Wall Street Liquid Lounge.
Black Wall Street Liquid Lounge has been open since about the second week of January.
The Black Wall Street Liquid Lounge represents sort of the collective of the community.
Both of our families have a history of entrepreneurs.
My Aunt Lucille and her husband moved to Tulsa in the 40s. She was a beautician and an entertainer, and she took on Madam C.J. Walker's franchise. First, she started as the principal of the school and ultimately built Troupe's Beauty College, where she taught the majority of the beauticians from the 40s to the late 70s. We like to say we're more than a coffee shop. We're really trying to revitalize entrepreneurs in the city.
We want to empower our youth and others to really reach their potential and rebirth what was here. And it's so important for youth to see people that look like them. That's the validation. That lets you know this is possible. We are not at a loss for intellectual capital, for creativity. We have tons of that in our community. People need to have, tools, a blueprint, a framework, mentors, sponsorship. Those are things that people in our community have not had. And so if they're provided with those tools, then they will prosper.
Our strategy is to develop our little piece, but help people do what O.W. Gurley and what J.B. Stratford and what Lula Williams and all of those iconic figures, how they thought. You have oranges, you have lemons, let's make some fruity drinks together.
My name is Venita Cooper, and I'm the owner and founder of Silhouette Sneakers and Art. We've been open since November 1st of last year. Whenever I moved here, the first things that I heard about were just like conflict around the development of the area, around like what should Greenwood look like in the future, what should it be right now, that kind of thing. I'm at a very advanced stage in life to be learning about it, which is very disappointing because I went to high school in Oklahoma, and even though I took Oklahoma history, I never learned about Black Wall Street or Greenwood, so it's been a crash course for me for sure. And part of that is that I get so many people who come into the store who are from Tulsa and are a product of the generations that lived during the massacre, and they want to tell those stories. And then the other side is that, people come to me and they want to know more. Like, they come to me to learn lessons about the massacre and about what happened after. And so I've just had to be really informed. I love sneakers, for sure. It's a passion of mine. But, I was an educator before that, and I've always had this desire to help community. When I was making the decision to open up a store, I actually had the opportunity to be in a space with a lot more foot traffic. It was more important to start a business in a historically significant area and to try to have a voice in the conversation around like what happens to this area moving forward. The spirit of Greenwood is really what's most important. The fact that we can look back at a legacy of excellence in entrepreneurship, and despite all the obstacles that we may have to overcome in our lives, look to that as a means of gaining strength. The fact that Greenwood still stands despite so many attempts by local, federal government, different policies that have undermined this community, that's like the spirit of Greenwood, and it's important that it be here as something for us to look to.
So the Centennial Commission was formed in 2015. At that time, we were 6 years away from what would be the 100th anniversary. In looking at where we are in Oklahoma, the language that was used around the anniversary of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City is that many would say, one of the worst acts of domestic terrorism, the bombing. So Senator Matthews and those would say, well, you do know that about 100 years ago, the worst case of Americans dropping bombs on their fellow Americans took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that got the conversations going. What are we as a city, as a community, as a state as a nation, going to have to show for what has taken place over 100 years since 1921. And that's really what led to what we have today in what will be the History Center, which is called Greenwood Rising. It's an 11,000 square foot facility. It's going to be a narrative museum experience. Where it's being built is at the corner of Greenwood and Archer. That is historically the gateway to what was Black Wall Street. That's going to tell the story of Greenwood, pre-statehood, how African Americans got their wealth, how did this place come to be, the actual massacre itself, and then an education on the fact that this community rebuilt itself, bigger and better than it was even in 1921, what many people don't know. And then to discuss the second decline. What caused, if this was such a wonderful place, what happened? We talk about that. And that all that leads to the journey to reconciliation. An actual space, an amphitheater style space where individuals, after learning this history, can come and sit down and have difficult discussions around race. We would not be here if it had not been for the efforts of John Hope Franklin Center for Reconciliation. They've been doing this work now for 10 plus years. The Greenwood Cultural Center. They began this back in the 90s when they built the 1921 Tulsa Race Rap Memorial. There has been small pockets of racial discussion, but not on a large enough, wide enough scale. And as we see across our country, Greenwood Rising is needed right now.
Part of the problem with our lack of progress as a country around this issue is that we're really struggling to come together.
It resonates because of our own ignorance. And we are ignorant because some people have made deliberate decisions to excise this stuff from the curriculum.
Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced.
Like the Black Lives Matter mural in the street, that's a dialogue. We believe that dialogue is critically important.
Because that's how you grow. That's how you overcome obstacles.
Where do we go from a George Floyd situation and a community like Tulsa still grappling with a Terrence Crutcher shooting?
We have a movement called Black Lives Matter. We have mass incarceration. We have all manner of race-based problems because we've not adequately grappled with our past.
There are still some pockets of America, there's some pockets of this system that needs to be addressed.
This feels like a very important time in our history, a time that may or may not return.
All this stuff is about shared humanity.
Until I start changing how you think of me, how I think of you, that's the only time that we're going to really see a beginning of a journey.
But the next step is action. It's engagement.
You have to come in and you have to ask for the Breonna Taylor. We want to say her name. We want to keep her alive.
Individual change at the collective level really does make a difference.
People are looking to the past almost for answers for how we sort of move forward.
LeBron James production company, he's actually doing a documentary. Russell Westbrook, John Legend, Damon Lindelof, executive producer of HBO Watchmen.
It's drawing attention quite literally from all over the world. So it's a great opportunity for us in Tulsa to connect the dots, to make sure people understand that if we don't tend to those historical wounds, we'll never achieve this sort of one America unity that we all claim that we want.
Though we have a long history, we have such a much longer future.
That could be triumphant, that this history led to people being able to have discussion and dialogue and heal from it and address some of the current ills of our nation.
Imperfect, growing, striving, changing. All words that would accurately describe our great city. Now more than ever, we believe Tulsans can be an example of how to confront our past while embracing our future. Because the people are what make us special. And no matter what part of the city you visit and who you run into, you'll probably hear the same three words. Welcome to Tulsa.